Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today, we're going to learn all about dehydrating and rehydrating our food. And I have quite a few things to say about it. The rehydrator and the dehydrator were introduced a couple of updates ago, and it gives us an ability to make our food shelf stable. In other words, it'll never expire, which would potentially make it a little bit better than the refrigerator, because while the refrigerator does make your food last longer, especially if you put it in a sterile atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide, the food will eventually spoil. In this case, the refrigerated fried mushrooms I have here would spoil in 33.3 cycles, which isn't too shabby, but not great for long-term storage. We also have access to the berry sludge that is produced by the microbe musher, and it's not a bad food, providing a good quality, which is the exact same as barbecue. The only difference being, the berry sludge will never spoil. So that gives us another option. Another common solution to make spoil-free food was to make a deep freezer. The deep freezer, as long as it's below -18 and itself in a sterile atmosphere, will deep freeze your food. In other words, it'll make sure that it never goes stale as well. Whenever we want to eat it, we just have an auto sweeper reach into the deep freezer and load up a refrigerator. Also fairly recently, we were given access to the spice grinder, which if you had access to salt and some mealwood seeds, could also extend the spoil time for any of your foods as well. In fact, since food only loses 8% in a normal atmosphere, the 13% reduction provided by the freshener spice would make your food never go off so long that it was refrigerated, which made it another good solution for something like space food. And that was really all we had until they gave us the dehydrator and the rehydrator. But I've got some pros and some cons behind using these. We'll get to those in a minute. The first thing you need to know is that drying the food requires a lot of time, almost a half a cycle at 250 seconds. After the food's been dehydrated, a duplicant gets an errand to finish off the process, and only then will you have access to your dehydrated food. Now each time you run this, you'll get 6 units of dried food. In this case, I'm using surf and turf, which, as another note, the food that you dehydrate has to be food that comes from your gas range. You cannot dehydrate food from your electric grill or otherwise raw food. In addition to the 250 seconds plus that duplicate errand, which could potentially take it a lot longer than 250 plus that errand's time, it requires 12 kilos worth of plastic and 6,000 calories of that food. You also note that I built the dehydrator above a mesh tile and have a liquid pump here. And that's because the act of dehydrating the food causes the building to dump water all over the floor. What, did you think clay was going to make it easy on you and give you a liquid output? Oh no. You don't have to worry about this water too much after you get this simple little system in place. While it is not water positive, it is a water neutral process. Because then once you have some dried food and a duplicant comes by to rehydrate it, while it requires water and a liquid input pipe, dehydrated food only requires 1 kilo of water, which is the exact amount of water that was produced by dehydrating the food in the first place. 1 kilo per 1,000 calories. First, a couple of pros. The dried surf and turf will never spoil. And I suppose if I dug deep, the fact that we have another couple buildings to play with is always a good thing. But other than that, I really don't have any more pros for you. Now for the cons. First, the 250 seconds plus that duplicate errand means at most, you're probably only going to be able to produce 2 batches of dehydrated food per cycle. And with each batch only supporting 6 duplicates, with 1 dehydrator, you're looking at only being able to support 12 duplicates. There is nothing to prevent you putting down a second dehydrator and hooking it in with your water pipe and everything, but this will also greatly increase the amount of duplicate labor. Because while the 250 seconds is long, so is the errand that the duplicate is required to do to actually get access to the dehydrated food. And as a quick note, this is a supplying errand, not a cooking errand. So having 2 dehydrators and subsequently doubling the amount of that duplicate labor required might be a little much for each dehydrator only supporting 12 duplicants per cycle. Another interesting note about the dehydrated food is the fact that the duplicants don't want to eat it. In fact, they'd rather eat anything else other than the rehydrated food. As an example, I've activated fried mushrooms, and you can see that they are able to eat surf and turf. And now all the duplicants will eat is the fried mushrooms that I have available in the colony, even though they have some wonderful surf and turf sitting ready for them. This is also represented in the fact that when a duplicant eats rehydrated food, they get a -1 to morale. So while the surf and turf is giving them a +12, the effective change is only going to be +11 because of that -1. Another disadvantage of it is the act of hydrating the food as well. While I'm sure it never happens in yours or my colony, if a duplicant is close to starving and they're required to come by the rehydrator to prepare their food before they're able to eat it, well, there's a chance they may starve in the process. Another con is I don't find this stable food source as practical in space, which is one of the best use cases for shelf-stable food. That way you don't have to have a refrigerator or worrying about food spoiling on your space flights. But the fact that you'd have to add a rehydrator wherever you have the dried surf and turf is another con. Finally, what may be just a temporary oversight, the biggest con for me, while it might be a little trivial, is the fact that the dehydrated food does not appear in your calories available. Also, going to the resources tab doesn't show how many calories you have available for it either. The only way I've figured out how to be able to tell is by putting all the dried surf and turf on top of a weight plate. And by looking at it and see that the weight plate says 37 kilos, knowing that each food pack is only 1 kilo means I have another 37 meals worth of surf and turf, or 37,000 calories. I know this was a little bit of a shorter video, but I had been wanting to take a look at the rehydrator and dehydrator since it came out, so I was happy to be able to do it. Now I'm probably going to keep the two buildings in this current colony, but I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to end up using them again in the future. But let me know in the comments below what you think of the two new buildings, or if there's a use case that you think they're valuable in. So until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.